In the mystical realm of Mornvale lies a small town where sunlight is a distant memory. Ranoras. Once prosperous, Ranoras now stands as a shadow of its former self. The streets of the town are narrow and paved with cobblestones, while small buildings fill out the area. The poor residents live in homes squeezed together in an effort to maximize space. The outskirts of Ranoras reveal a stark contrast. The buildings become sparse, giving way to open fields. Nestled amidst the natural beauty, the grand estates of the wealthy rise majestically. Among them, the Hamilton family claims their grand estate, a symbol of their elevated status and prosperity. A gentle breeze enters through the open bedroom window, ruffling Gena Hamilton's hair. Despite the early hour, a sense of boredom washes over her as the realization of another day at the college settles in. Time and time again, Gena finds herself dreading the experience, feeling inadequate and out of place amidst her talented peers. While her classmates possess remarkable abilities and show great promise, Gena questions her own worthiness. Her enrollment in the esteemed College of Wardens is solely due to her family's influence and decisions. The college, an imposing structure nestled within the town of Ranoras, serves as a haven for the devoted Warden Sisters of Mornvale. These courageous female paladins dedicate their lives to protect the realm. The college specializes in honing skills in combat and magic, molding individuals into formidable Warden Sisters. Gena had pleaded with her parents, desperate to avoid the seemingly pointless classes that only highlighted her shortcomings. She yearned for a different path. Donned in one of her handcrafted red dresses, Gena takes solace in the elegance it brings. The dress accentuates her striking red eyes, lending an air of nobility to her presence. Leaving her home behind, Gena felt a strong urge to change her course. Instead of heading towards the College of Wardens, she found herself drawn towards the alluring embrace of the nearby forest. The idea of spending another day confined within the college walls felt suffocating, and she yearned for a taste of freedom. As she walked along the familiar path that led to the outskirts of Ranoras, she gazed up at the misty sky, contemplating a path that would lead her to a tranquil spot in the forest, where she could hopefully revel in solitude for the remainder of the day. With each step, Gena felt the weight of society's expectations falling away. Determined to embrace the unknown, Gena made a decision. Instead of continuing on the familiar path to the forest, she ventured off the beaten track. The forest welcomed her with open arms, its trees standing tall like guardians of a forgotten realm. The air grew cooler, and the rustling of the leaves accompanied her every step. Feeling a sense of peace and serenity, Gena settled herself on a bed of soft moss, the earth beneath her providing a comforting embrace. Exhaustion washes over her, and as the gentle rustling of the leaves and the soothing sounds of nature envelop her, she succumbed to a deep slumber. As she slept, a mystical mist began to rise, swirling and dancing around her form. It seemed as though the very essence of the forest had awakened, drawn to Gena's presence. Gena's eyes fluttered open as a faint rustling sound reached her ears. Confusion clouded her mind as she scanned her surroundings, and then her gaze locked onto a figure standing before her. Before her stood a pale woman with long grey hair hanging over her shoulders, dressed in a flowy white gown. Though the woman appeared proper, her expression seemed vacant. "You've awakened, my dear." The lady's voice resonated like a gentle breeze, carrying a hint of otherworldly melody. Gena surveyed her surroundings, realizing she had become disoriented in her thoughts. Where was she exactly? The thick fog obscured her view, making it difficult to discern her surroundings. As the mist closed in, obscuring the woman's face mere inches away, a shiver ran down Gena's spine. "Who are you?" Gena asked. The woman's grin widened. "I am but a guide, here to illuminate your path." Gena's curiosity piqued as she inquired, "How?" "That depends. What has plagued your thoughts for years, Gena Hamilton?" Surprised by the woman's knowledge of her name, Gena demanded answers. The woman evaded the question, but claimed to know Gena's desires and offered a trade. Gena scoffed. "A trade? Who do you think I am? Some common peasant? My family provides me with everything and more." The woman met Gena's gaze, her voice filled with intrigue. "Everything, you say? But does your family possess the power to grant you the ability to shape your own destiny, Gena?" Gena dismissed the notion, refusing to be swayed. However, the woman's unwavering stare persisted. "What if I told you such powers really existed? I can guide you towards it. Seek out Dupont, and you shall find what you seek." "Dupont? That charlatan who masquerades as a collector while his collection is built upon stolen treasures?" Gena voiced her doubts. The woman affirmed, "Indeed, one of his possessions will call out to you." Gena let out a soft laugh. "Even if what you say is true, I cannot simply waltz into town and steal from Dupont." "Why not? Are you not Gena Hamilton, one of the aspiring Warden sisters?" Gena hesitated in her response. "Well, not officially. I have yet to complete my training, and I am uncertain if I ever will." The woman's voice carried a note of conviction. "All you need is that item. Once it is in your possession, everything will fall into place." Gena's gaze fell to the ground, contemplating the woman's words. When she raised her eyes again, ready to inquire about the specific item she should seek, she found herself alone. The woman had vanished without a trace. Gena scanned her surroundings, searching for any sign of her, but there was no one to be found. Gena rose from a resting spot as the mist dissipated, revealing a clear path back to Ranoras. She got up and began walking home. Her mind buzzed with unanswered questions. Eventually, Gena emerged from the forest, greeted by the familiar sight of Ranoras. She debated returning to the College of Wardens, where her absence would surely be noticed. But having missed her classes, she decided it was best to head home. The front door of the mansion swung open, revealing a dimly lit hallway. Gena hesitated for a moment, preparing herself for what awaited her inside. She knew her parents would be disappointed by her absence from the college. As Gena stepped inside, she found her parents waiting for her in the main room. Her father motioned her to take a seat, and her heart sank as she saw the sadness in her mother's eyes. They expressed their concerns about her absence from classes concluding that it would be best for her to live at the college with the warden sisters and maesters. They believed the structured environment would help her establish a disciplined routine. Gena tried to voice her objections, but her father interrupted sternly, dismissing her complaints. "No more excuses, Gena. This decision was made for your own good. Starting next week, you will stay at the college and prove yourself as a true warden sister." The weight of her father's disappointment hung heavily in the air, and Gena sighed, accepting her fate. As she swallowed her tears, Gena walked towards the dinner table, where her brother was already seated. The room came alive with anticipation as he began to share stories from his day in the city guard. His words wove a tapestry of thrilling adventures and heroic deeds, capturing the undivided attention of her parents. Laughter danced in the air, mingling with the aroma of the evening meal. Gena listened attentively, her eyes flickering with a mix of pride for her sibling and a twinge of longing for her own moment of triumph. With a quiet resolve, Gena excuses herself from the table, walking to the solace of her own bedroom. The weight of her family's expectation pressed heavily upon her, suffocating her spirit. The lady's words echoed in her mind as the house fell still and the moon behind the mist cast a soft glow upon the world. Gena made a decision. Dupont typically tends to his so-called collector's cellar in the mornings, suggesting that now might be the best moment to strike. Tonight, under the cover of darkness, she would venture there. With skillful precision, Gena climbed out of her window. The cool night air brushed against her skin as she descended to the ground below. Her footsteps, barely audible, carried her towards Dupont's cellar, hidden away at the edge of town. As she approached the old cellar, Gena's heart quickened. The door stood before her, weathered and worn, its secrets concealed within. Fixating on the heavy wooden door before her, she scans her surroundings to ensure no prying eyes observe her actions. She reached out, her hand trembling with a mixture of fear and excitement, and pushed the door open. The creaking hinges echoed in the stillness of night as she stepped into the dimly lit space. As Gena ventured into the cellar, her eyes scanned the walls adorned with an array of items. Numerous objects hang on hooks and dusty shelves, but they appeared unremarkable and seemingly worthless. She had expected to find magical artifacts. Doubts clouded her mind. Had the lady in the forest misled her? However, Gena remained resolute in her search. Among the peculiar items that caught her attention, a collection of crystal balls, jade animal statues, leather bags. Gena's gaze landed on a shiny golden hourglass. Could this be the item she sought? It stood out from the rest, radiating a sense of value and significance. Gena wondered if it possessed magical properties, potentially bestowing her with some kind of magic. As she reached out to grasp the hourglass, faint whispers, unlike any human voice, tickled at her ears. Though barely audible, they penetrated her consciousness. Intrigued, Gena turned around, her eyes falling upon a magnificent sword adorned with a red gem in its steady yet elegant hilt. Compelled by an unseen force, she drew closer, and with each step, the sword emanated a growing reddish glow. As Gena reached out, her hand clasping the hilt, the whispers intensified, as if infiltrating her mind. She experienced a surge of warmth, a sensation of strength and pride coursing through her veins. This must be the item she was meant to find. Determined, she secured the sword and swiftly exited the cellar, aware of the importance of attending her classes the next day. She went back home and fell asleep. Despite the absence of the morning sun, Gena's internal clock nudged her awake. She slipped into her signature red dress and secured her chainmail top piece, ensuring her appearance reflected her role as a warden's sister. Fatigue lingered from the restless night, but Gena refused to let it show, determined to maintain her impeccable facade. As she descended the stairs, her father awaited her at the doorway. Annoyance etched at his face. "Gena, you're late for class," he said. Nervousness seeped into Gena's voice as she replied, "I didn't realize." Her father's concern deepened, his voice tinged with frustration. "How can you become a warden's sister if you neglect your responsibilities, Gena?" In a surge of fury, Gena quickly replied, "Father, I am well aware of my shortcomings in these warding classes. I do not possess your powers in battle or my brother's esteemed position in the city guard. But I endure, out of respect for you and mother. Now, if you'll kindly excuse me, apparently I am late for class." With these words, Gena stormed out the door. Gena arrived in the courtyard, where her classmates were already engaged in training their fighting skills. Her habitual lateness went unnoticed, as it often did, and the maester acknowledged her presence with a nod. He paired her with one of her classmates for sparring practice. As she unstrapped her new sword from her bag, a subtle pulse of energy emanated from the red gem embedded in the hilt. Her classmate Emilia raised an eyebrow, surprised by the size of Gena's weapon. "Aren't you a bit too small to handle such a large weapon?" Gena remained silent, her focus fixed on the duel. She felt an unfamiliar surge of power coursing through her. As the fight commenced, her strikes seemed infused with an otherworldly grace of precision. With each swing, the sword got a faint ethereal glow, lending an almost enchanting aura to Gena's movements. When she successfully disarmed her opponent, Emilia fell to the ground, and an eerie hush fell over the courtyard. Gena's victory seemed more than mere skill. It carried a mysterious air of supernatural ability. Emilia, astonished and slightly shaken, groaned as she looked up at Gena. "I suppose you had some training from your city guard brother, didn't you?" She grumbled in annoyance. Gena, still in the grip of the sword's influence, maintained her calm demeanor. She took a step back, allowing Emilia to retrieve her fallen weapon and prepare for another round. As Emilia swung her sword, Gena evaded the attack with uncanny precision, her movements seemingly guided by an unseen force. With a calculated maneuver, Gena tripped Emilia, causing her to crash to the ground once more. The onlookers couldn't help but notice the extraordinary nature of Gena's fighting style. Whispers rippled through the courtyard as her classmates exchanged astonishing glances. The maester, keenly observant, called Gena over and praised her for this impressive display. "Great work today, Gena," he remarked, his voice filled with admiration. "All this training is finally paying off." Gena nodded, accepting the maester's praise while being intrigued by the sword's abilities. The maester's gaze drifted towards Gena's sword, the red gem in its hilt catching the attention. "It's quite a remarkable sword, I must say." Gena quickly responded, "It was a gift." The maester winked knowingly, his tone playful. "Of course it was. Now,
Continue on your way before you're late for your next class. May the gods be with you.
Gena nodded and proceeded indoors, ready to embark on the next part of her day. Staring into nothingness, Gena contemplated whether her recent successes were truly her own, or if the mysterious sword had a play in it. Lost in her thoughts, she was jolted back to reality, to the sound of her name being called. Gena! Gena! Gena Hamilton! The voice of Sister Garel, her magic teacher, pierced through her distractions. Gena's classmates turned to look at her as she sat at her desk, a bit startled. Sister Garel looked at her with a questioning gaze and asked, "Can you repeat what I just said?" Caught off guard, Gena took a moment to collect herself before responding. "Those who do not believe in magic will never find it, and those who do not control magic would never be a warden, sister, as magic was used to keep the land safe." Sister Garel nodded approvingly, affirming Gena's understanding of the lesson. However, the topic swiftly shifted as Sister Garel invited Gena to the front of the class, specifically requesting her to attempt the blessing spell once more. Gena's classmates started to giggle, aware of her struggles with this spell. Doubts and insecurities crept in as she walked to the front, fearing another public failure. Gena stood before her classmates, facing Sister Garel. The task at hand was clear: to perform the blessing spell and prove herself capable. But where did this power within reside? How did she access it? Sister Garel's encouraging voice broke through her thoughts, urging Gena to focus and reminding her of her potential. Gena made another attempt, trying to summon the elusive power within her. But again, nothing happened. Frustration began to well up within her. Gena took a deep breath and closed her eyes, gathering her thoughts. She recalled the words of the lady in the forest and the feeling of power surging through her. Gena could feel a warm energy faintly filling her hands, and she sensed the whispers from the sword growing louder and louder in her mind. Memories of her father's disappointment, the classmates who laughed at her, and the doubts swirled within her thoughts. Lost in the surge of power and conflicting emotions, Gena's eyes beamed with a fury red glow. With a swift move of her hand through the air, she began to perform the greater blessing spell. As Gena completed the spell, a hush fell over the classroom. Her classmates and even Sister Garel gazed at her in awe. However, Sister Garel sensed something amiss beneath the surface. There was a dark presence that lurked within the depths of Gena. Sister Garel's heart quickened with concern as she recognized the sign of a potential descent into darkness. Just as Gena began to explore the depths of her thoughts, she felt a hand on her shoulder, jolting her back to reality. Sister Garel's concerned gaze met Gena's. "Well done, Gena. Today not only you casted a blessing spell, but you also successfully performed an advanced version of the spell." Gena looked down at her hands, noticing that the warm energy had faded. With a nod, she took her seat. She had achieved something extraordinary, casting a greater blessing spell that none of her classmates had managed to cast before. As the class continued, Gena gradually regained her composure. The warm energy within her subsided, leaving a lingering sense of unease. Sister Garel watched Gena closely, aware of the internal battle she was facing. Finally, as class came to an end, Gena walked towards Sister Garel. Sister Garel took hold of Gena's hand. "Child, you displayed a remarkable ability today. Sister Garel began, her voice tinged with a hint of uncertainty. I sense the presence, a dark energy within your spell. It bore resemblance to eldritch magic. Gena's eyes widened in surprise and confusion. Eldritch magic? Sister Garel, I assure you, I have not studied or dabbled in any form of eldritch magic. I have dedicated myself solely to the teachings of light and healing. Sister Garel's gaze softened, understanding the sincerity in Gena's words. I believe you, child, but I noticed something unique within your spellcasting today. It resonated with the dark, mysterious, and sometimes dangerous powers associated with eldritch magic. Gena's confusion deepened. How could her magic be linked to eldritch forces when she had dedicated herself to the teachings of light and healing? Sensing the worry in Gena's red eyes, Sister Garel placed a comforting hand on Gena's shoulder. There is much we don't yet understand about eldritch magic, Gena. While it can be associated with destructive purposes, it also holds the potential for great good in the right hands. With a gentle smile, she released her hold on Gena's shoulder and reaches for a leather-bound book. This book holds ancient wisdom. It's a companion that will help you navigate the complexities of your path, unlocking its secrets when the time is right. Gena accepted the book. Feeling intrigued, she held it in her hands. Flipping through the seemingly empty pages, the book's true purpose will become clear to you as you embark on your journey. For now, I believe it's best for you to go home and take some rest. Remember that the teachings of light and healing are your foundation. With a final supportive smile, Sister Garel dismissed Gena from class. Gena walked home with a cloud of confusion hanging over her. Eldritch powers seemed like a contradiction to everything she has been taught. The path that was laid out for her as a warden sister now felt uncertain and full of shadows. Arriving home, Gena quietly entered her bedroom, closing the door behind her. The familiar surroundings offered solace, but her mind remained restless. She approached the mirror. Her red eyes, usually a source of pride, now held a hint of uncertainty. Sitting on the edge of her bed, Gena delved into her thoughts, trying to make sense of the conflicting nature of her magic. The whispers from her sword echoed in her mind. What did it really mean to possess eldritch magic? Was it a curse or a blessing? Gena held the glowing sword in her hands, feeling a surge of energy coursing through her, connecting her to the mysterious whisper she heard. In the depths of her mind, she reached out, seeking understanding from the otherworldly power resonating within the sword. Images flashed before her closed eyes, a tapestry of forgotten legends, battles fought in distant realms, and the untapped potential hidden within her own being. With a deep breath, Gena opened her eyes and looked down at the sword, its faint glow reflecting in her gaze. Reveal to me the path I must take, she whispered. Suddenly, the whispers grew louder, echoing in her mind. The sword pulsed with energy, responding to her inquiry. It showed her a world in chaos, where darkness was spreading and a delicate balance between light and shadow hung in its balance. The sword's name is Shade, a woman's voice announced. Gena's eyes widened in disbelief as she saw the lady from the forest standing before her. Taken aback, Gena stumbled backwards, overwhelmed with questions. How did the lady find her way into her house? In her room? Hush, the lady commanded. I exist between dreams and reality. I brought your dreams to life, And now it's time for you to fulfill your part of the bargain. Confusion tinged Gena's voice as she replied. Bargain? You never mentioned any depth for granting me this power. Her mind raced with countless inquiries, but the lady raised her hand, signaling for silence. I sensed something within your soul, and I brought this sword to you. Breaking the connection would come with grave consequences. Gena struggled to comprehend it all, but the lady merely smiled mysteriously. Listen closely. In a few days, you will be sent to live with the elders at the college. DuPont will realize the sword is missing and search for you. Can you imagine the outcome? The lady offered an alternative path. The path of eldritch magic? The lady nodded, acknowledging her words. Remember, Gena, shade resides within you. You were chosen as its vessel, and it will grant you the strength to endure and continue the fight. It's best you embark on your journey to Brecton tonight. Before Gena could inquire further, the lady vanished, leaving Gena alone in a mist-filled room. Immediately, Gena packed her most cherished belongings. Wearing her favorite red dress with a chainmail armor top, she secured a sword to her back and put on a dark cloak. She took one last look around the room, her eyes lingering on the familiar surroundings. The room that once offered solace and comfort now felt like a cage. With a heavy sigh, she shouldered her bag and walked towards the window. As she unlatched the window, a soft breeze whispered through her room. Gena glanced back, catching a glimpse of her family's portrait hanging on the wall. She climbed onto the windowsill, ready to embark the unknown. With a leap of faith, she jumped, landing gracefully on the soft grass below. Her departure went unnoticed in the stillness of the night. The world around her seemed to hold its breath. Gena straightened her cloak, adjusted the weight of shade on her back, and began to make her way through the shadows, slipping away from her family home. After a few days of travel, Gena's gaze locked onto the towering walls that encircled the small city of Brecton. They loomed larger than anything she had ever seen before. Stepping through the city gates, her senses were assailed by the sights, sounds, and scents of the bustling trading hub. Stalls lined the cobblestone streets, offering a variation of wares, from fresh produce and livestock to exquisite clothing. The mist, a companion from her own hometown, swirled through the air, creating an eerie atmosphere that she found oddly comforting. In search of a place to rest, Gena stepped into the first tavern that caught her eye. Inside, a barmaid with flowing blonde locks greeted her warmly, her genuine smile putting Gena at ease. The barmaid's observant eyes scanned her up and down before guiding her towards an empty table. Curiosity piqued. The barmaid struck up a conversation, sensing that Gena was a stranger in this city. As Gena removed her sword and took a seat on a wooden stool, she remained guarded, keeping her origins and true identity to herself. Sensing her need for solace, the barmaid offered her a drink. Just as the barmaid was about to turn away, Gena inquired about her name. A simple gesture of human connection in this unfamiliar place. The barmaid, known as Vivian Patel, responded with a touch of pride and warmth. However, as Gena unwittingly revealed her full name, Vivian's eyes widened and her mouth slightly agape. The realization of Gena's noble lineage dawned upon her. She hastily composed herself and apologized for any perceived shortcomings. expressing her gratitude for Gena's presence at the humble establishment. With a bow, she departed to fetch Gena's drink, leaving Gena to contemplate her lapse in discretion. Gena's thoughts turned inwards as she lowered her gaze to the table, contemplating the consequences of revealing her noble status. She realized the attention could be threatening to overshadow her true purpose in Brecton. Determined to stay anonymous, she pulled her hood over her face, seeking the partial concealment it provided for the time being. As Gena waited for her drink, she remembered the book she received from Sister Corell. Maybe she could use it to document her journey. Gena's fingers tightened around the leather-bound book and the quill she had taken from her bag. Opening the book to the first page, she began to write. I arrived in Brecton. No idea why I'm here, but I had to escape Ranoras, as I was told. I stumbled upon a tavern and met Vivian Patel, a barmaid at the Purple Stag Tavern. As Gena prepared to close the book, something peculiar happened. The ink on the page started to fade, vanishing until the surface went blank again. Confusion filled her expression until, unexpectedly, a sentence appeared on the page, seemingly in response to her writing. The words read, Vivian Patel, age 27, born in Brecton. It was evident that the book held more than met the eye. The ordinary pages held hidden depths, secrets awaiting to be unveiled. Gena's curiosity got the better of her, and she wondered what would happen if she wrote her own name in the book. Will it reveal something mysterious about her? With a mix of excitement and caution, she decided to give it a try. Carefully, she writes her own name on the blank page, hoping for a surprising revelation. But to her surprise, nothing happens. The page remained empty, leaving Gena confused and unsure. It's as if the book doesn't hold any answers about her own identity. Taking a sip of her ale, Gena felt the weight of the barmaid gaze upon her. To escape the unwavering stare, she decided it would be wise to venture further into the city. Settling her bill, Gena gracefully left the tavern, blending into the vibrant streets of Brecton. Guided by the inviting scent of freshly baked goods, she found herself drawn to a nearby bakery. She purchased a warm piece of bread, its flavors enhanced by a subtle infusion of herbs. The delightful taste momentarily distracted her from the weight of her circumstances. With her book, sword, and the lingering taste of freshly baked bread, Gena surveyed the scenery before her. Brecton revealed its magnificence, with busy streets and towering buildings that seemed to reach the skies. To succeed, she needed to seek out influential individuals in the city. Gena set her course towards the upper part of Brecton. As she went up, she couldn't help but be amazed by the sight before her. A tall church tower standing above the roofs. The church was truly impressive. A group of elderly men came out of the church, bringing a sense of calm to the area. Undeterred, she entered the church, feeling a mysterious force guiding her to its center. The interior of the church enveloped Gena in a serene atmosphere. Numerous candles flickered, casting playful shadows on the colorful stained glass. Gena found a seat on one of the wooden benches, her eyes fixated on a focal point of the church, a grand statue that demanded attention. It depicted Tyr, the god of law and justice in all his majestic glory. With reverence, Gena opened her mystical book and began inscribing the name of Tyr. As the ink settled onto the page, the words emerged, unveiling the divine essence of Tyr. He was revered as the Ever-Watcher, the one who sees all, whose gaze had the power to penetrate the deepest secrets of mortals. Though impressed by Tyr's reputation, Gena felt a sense of frustration. She knew that simply possessing knowledge of a god's attributes wouldn't provide the answers she sought on her journey. Gena's gaze shifted upwards, locking onto the statue of Tyr with a determined squint. It dawned upon her that relying solely on divine intervention or seeking guidance from ordinary individuals might not be enough to overcome the challenges she faced. A realization took hold. She needed to seek out someone of unique importance and insight, someone who could offer assistance on her perilous path. Gena left the peaceful church and walked through the streets of Brecton towards the upper part of the city, where another tavern awaited her. Inside the tavern, she noticed it was different from the rustic one she had visited earlier. The tavern had stone walls and plenty of windows. The wooden benches were intricately carved, and a warm fire crackled in the fireplace, filling the air with the scent of burning wood. The tavern was relatively quiet, with only a few people scattered around. Gena decided to blend in by lowering her hood and taking a seat at the bar. She looked around, observing the room. The bartender, a friendly middle-aged man, approached her. Gena nodded gratefully and asked for a room to spend the night. She was tired from her journey and longed for a comfortable bed to rest in. With the room secured, she made her way upstairs. Gena lay in her cozy bed, but sleep eluded her. The burden of this mission weighed heavily upon her, and her thoughts raced with a whirlwind of questions. Despite her restless mind, exhaustion eventually caught up with her, pulling her into a deep and dreamless sleep. The next morning, Gena awoke feeling refreshed and renewed. She dressed herself in her red dress and carefully draped the cloak over her shoulders. Taking a moment to collect herself, she made her way downstairs to the dining area of the tavern. As she pondered over her breakfast options, her attention was drawn to a lively conversation at a nearby table. Intrigued by their animated discussion, Gena's curiosity was piqued. Could these be the individuals she sought? The ones with knowledge and influence? With a determined resolve, she decided to approach them, hoping they would offer insight or guidance for her journey. The conversation paused briefly as their eyes turned towards her. Gena greeted the group of people and said she couldn't help but to be drawn to the engaging discussion. The individuals exchanged glances, assessing her presence, until one of them, a wise-looking woman with silver hair, nodded and gestured to an empty chair.
Certainly, my dear. We welcome your company. Please, have a seat and share our conversation.
Gena took a seat and listened as they discussed matters of history, lore, and the interplay of magic in the realm. As the hours progressed, Gena found herself immersed in their stories, her mind expanding with newfound knowledge and perspectives. Ilara, the wise woman with silver hair, noticed Gena's genuine interest. With a gentle smile, she leaned in and whispered, "You possess a hunger for knowledge, and I sense a unique spark within you, my dear. It's a rare gift. Follow your intuition and trust in your own abilities." Gena absorbed Ilara's words, feeling a surge of inspiration and validation. After hours had passed, Gena thanked the group for their wisdom and bid them farewell. She stepped out into the cool air, clutching her trusty leather book. Finding a quiet spot nearby, she reflected and wrote down Ilara's name. Gena's eyes widened in wonder as the page transformed before her. The ink began to swirl and form intricate patterns, revealing not just a name, but also fragments of Ilara's story. She read about Ilara's extensive knowledge of myths and her mastery in elemental magic. As Gena gazed at the information in the book, a realization dawned upon her. The book possessed the ability to reveal information about magic users when their names were written into the page. Eager to test her newfound understanding, Gena took a deep breath and focused her thoughts. With a steady hand, she wrote down, "Magic users." The ink faded and replaced by a subtle glow as words began to manifest. Page after page, the book unveiled a compilation of names, each accompanied by descriptions, locations, and their respective magical specialties. Gena's eyes scanned the entries, searching for any hint of eldritch magic. Her heart quickened as she spotted a few names that stood out, individuals rumored to possess knowledge of the forbidden arts. Among the names was Halaric Shadowweaver, a secretive warlock said to dwell in the depths of the ancient forest. Another entry revealed Arenthia, a scholar known for her expertise in manipulating dark energies. And then there was Kelthorn the warlock, who lived in Brecton. His mastery over dark forces was both feared and respected. Gena knew that if she sought out Kelthorn, she might find the answer she sought. He might hold the key to unlocking the secrets of eldritch magic, the very magic that had intertwined itself with her soul. Gena carefully closed the book, armed with the knowledge she had gained. She set out through the winding streets of Brecton, keeping an eye out for any sign or whisper that might lead her to this elusive warlock. Rumors spread fast in the town, and it didn't take long for Gena to hear about a mysterious person named Kelthorn the Shadowborn. Curious, she followed the stories and eventually found herself in front of a run-down building hidden in a forgotten part of the town. Approaching the building's entrance, Gena saw a worn-out exterior, hinting at the secrets hidden within. She took a deep breath and pushed open the squeaky door, entering an unfamiliar space. Inside, the air smelled of old books and faint traces of powerful magic. Gena looked around, taking in the shelves filled with strange books and artifacts. In the shadows, she caught a glimpse of a cloaked figure. Summoning her bravery, Gena cautiously approached the figure. "Are you Kelthorn the warlock?" she asked. The figure turned slowly. He looked at Gena with a distant gaze before responding. "Yes, I am Kelthorn. What do you want?" Gena gathered her thoughts and explained her situation. Kelthorn kept looking at her. "Ah, a cursed sword and a binding spell," Kelthorn pondered, his voice carrying a hint of disinterest. "It's fascinating, in its own twisted way. But why do you think I would care about your problems?" Though discouraged by his dismissive tone, Gena persisted. She sought guidance to break free from its grasp. Kelthorn's eyes narrowed, his initial disinterest waning. He considered Gena for a moment, intrigued by the possibility of unlocking Shade's secrets. "You want to use eldritch magic to break free from your chains?" Gena felt a shiver run down her spine, but she steeled herself, determined to uncover the secrets that lay within Kelthorn's realm. She continued to speak, her words laced with a glimmer of hope. "I have glimpsed the power of eldritch magic, Kelthorn. Shade has shown me the potential that lies within, but it has also led me astray. I need your guidance to find a way out of this abyss." Kelthorn's eyes narrowed, studying Gena intently. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a low whisper. "Indeed, Gena, the power you seek is within your grasp, he said, his voice dripping with both seduction and menace. But it comes at a price. To break free from Shade's hold, you must embrace the darkness fully. Only then you can find the strength to break the ties that bind you. Gena's heart raced as she contemplated Kelthorne's proposition. She understood the dangers that lurked within his words, the treacherous path that lay before her. She hesitated. The echoes of Sister Garel's warnings resonated within her, reminding her of the perils that awaited her if she succumbed to the allure of the forbidden arts. I will not be consumed by darkness, Kelthorne, Gena declared. I will harness the power within. I will not let it define me. Show me the path that leads to liberation, and I will walk it with caution. Kelthorne's smirk widened, impressed by Gena's unwavering spirit. The warlock gestured towards an old bookshelf lined with tomes. Very well, Gena, he hissed. The answers you seek lie within the forbidden pages of these books. Read them, study them, and let the knowledge seep within your very being. But remember, the path to freedom is treacherous, and the price to be paid may be higher than you can imagine. Gena approached the bookshelf, dread welled up within her. With the weight of Shade upon her back and Kelthorne's eyes upon her, Gena reached out, her trembling hand selecting a dusty tome from the shelf. Little did she know that the pages she was about to turn held both the key to her freedom and the depths of her greatest trials yet to come. Days turned into weeks as Gena delved deeper into the forbidden knowledge within the tombs. Under the watchful gaze of Kelthorne, she studied, absorbing the secrets and intricacies of eldritch magic. Every page she turned brought her closer to unlocking the key to her liberation. Gena found herself tested by the evil forces that sought to corrupt and consume her. Shadows whispered in her ear, promising untold power and dominion, while eerie visions haunted her dreams, urging her to surrender to the darkness within. But Gena was forging her own path, resisting the allure of darkness and weaving her own unique blend of magic, drawing from both light and shadow. With each passing day, Gena's understanding of eldritch magic grew, and her control over her own powers became more refined. She honed her abilities, learning to wield the shadows as a shield and the light as a beacon of hope. In the midst of her studies, Gena discovered a crucial revelation. The power she sought to break free from Shade's grip resided not solely within external forces, but within her own strength and will. She realized that Shade was a reflection of her own inner turmoil, a mirror that she must face and conquer. Embracing this newfound insight, Gena confronted Shade, engaging in a fierce battle of wills. With every strike of the sword, she fought against its insidious influence, refusing to let it define her. With every swing, Gena could feel the weight of the dark power pushing against her, its tendrils attempting to ensnare her spirit. It was a relentless struggle that taxed her both physically and mentally. Sweat dripped down her forehead, her muscles strained, but she refused to yield. Summoning all her inner fortitude, Gena focused her thoughts and uttered her own name with unwavering conviction. In that pivotal moment of self-affirmation, a resounding echo pierced in the air, and the spell that had bound her to Shade shattered into countless shards of dark energy. In that moment of liberation, Gena realized the immense power that resided within her. Kelthorn stood before Gena, his eyes flickering with respect. The darkness that had once shrouded his features had dissipated, replaced by a glimmer of admiration for the young Gena Hamilton. "You possess a rare strength, Gena Hamilton," Kelthorn remarked. "To face the darkness within and emerge with such resolve. It's a testament to your own character and your unwavering spirit." After her transformative journey and the battle she faced, Gena felt a pull in her heart, drawing her back to the halls of the Warden Sisterhood. She recognized the profound impact her experience had and her understanding of the delicate balance between light and darkness. With a newfound sense of purpose, she sought to share her wisdom and protect others from the perils she had faced. Returning to the Warden Sisterhood, Gena was welcomed with open arms by her fellow sisters. They reveled at her growth, both in her skills as a warrior and her inner strength. Gena's tale of overcoming the corrupting influence of shade inspired her comrades, breathing new life into their own commitment to their sacred duty. As she settled back into her role as a Warden Sister, Gena found herself assuming a position of leadership. Her experience with eldritch magic and cursed artifacts brought a unique perspective to the sisterhood, enabling her to impart invaluable knowledge to her fellow sisters. Gena trained them in recognizing the signs of corruption and shared strategies for resisting the allure of dark forces. The sisterhood flourished under Gena's influence. Within the sanctuary of the Warden Sisterhood, Gena finally found her purpose. She became a beacon of hope, reminding her fellow sisters that even in the face of the most daunting challenges, they possess the power to stand against the shadows.